Welcome to Media Melanie Talks TV. I'm Melanie, and I'm back today to talk about Severance Season 2 on Apple TV+. We just saw Episode 3, Who's Alive? Let me just say, the goat of it all got me in this episode. We have seen the goats back from Season 1. We now got a real glimpse into the goat department, the mammalian nurturing. I'm still not exactly sure what's going on with the goats, so my theory video today will not be on the goats. I'm going to gather more intel on that situation, so I do hope to do on moving forward. Today, I'm going to focus on Gretchen and Dylan's visit. In a previous video, I suggested that perhaps this family visitation area would be part of an experiment and that they wouldn't even necessarily bring in the Audi's family members. They would perhaps bring in some sort of impostor to further this experiment or see how this whole severance procedure is working. It's working well because they do bring Gretchen in, Dylan's wife. This is something that Milchek had introduced to Dylan. I thought it was all going to be a big scam. I wasn't even sure Gretchen would be Dylan's real wife. It is revealed that, in fact, she is, and her husband has had a really hard time holding down a job in the outside world. And while Lumen is using this as a tactic to manipulate Dylan, to really separate him from everything that the other Innies are up to in terms of investigating right now, it works. And I don't think Dylan even thought this would happen, but he enters the room and he is his cool Dylan Innie self. And you can tell right away that Gretchen seems to be more attracted to Innie Dylan than Audi Dylan. Dylan even says, "Is my Audi a fuck up?" And I mean, maybe not a real fuck up, but he definitely has had trouble holding down a job. So my theory is we see Gretchen working a night shift, dressed in a uniform that is giving either security, law enforcement, some sort of perhaps government institution. If she is in fact a security guard, what if she works at Lumen, she works the night shift, and she got Dylan a job there as a last resort? This stuck out to me because when Gretchen was in there and she mentions the name Seth Milchek, of course, but the Innies don't know what Milchek's first name is. Miss Huang does interrupt on a camera, which she's watching, even though, I don't know, no one's supposed to be watching them. Does she know Milchek's first name because she actually works at Lumen? Or is it just because Milchek was the one to facilitate this visit in the first place? I lean towards the former because everything this show does is so smart, so intentional. It is a gorgeous show with an incredibly talented cast and really shaping up to be the show of the year, and we're not even out of the first month of 2025. Again, I wasn't sure this was actually Dylan's wife, but it was confirmed because we do see that interaction between them at their home with Dylan as his Audi. So it is 100% his wife. It is not an imposter after all. They get 18 minutes to visit together. At first, I was just getting the vibe that perhaps they are separated or getting divorced or maybe even already divorced, but you can still pick up on a touch of love. You can tell that Gretchen cares for Dylan, but it's like she's frustrated with the man he is in the outside. And they had really set the table for this because we saw Dylan going through all of those job interviews, not really being able to come up with anything. He did hit it off with the door factory guy, but because he worked for Lumen and was severed, there's a great deal of discrimination there. So he wasn't able to get that job, seemingly any other job, or if he did, even hold it down. So Dylan's lucky that Lumen asked him back. He is succeeding at this job, he is productive, he earns incentives, and now he's earned the biggest incentive of all and is perhaps the first Innie who's working at Lumen that gets to actually visit with their family from the outside. It is a creepy visit, though. It's a little bit uncomfortable. Imagine being a spouse where you're talking to your spouse, but they don't actually know who you are or remember you or your children. She has to tell him their kids' names. Jim, Ruth, and Merrick. When we get to see Dylan and Gretchen interacting in their home, the lights are out, Dylan's sitting there watching TV. Nothing wrong with sitting on the couch watching TV, but if there's other stuff to get done, such as, I don't know, making cookies for one of your kids, and you don't even necessarily know how to open a tube and cut it up, that is speaking volumes about Outie Dylan. I am so endeared to Innie Dylan. I think Gretchen will be too. She didn't share a lot of details with her Outie husband about how the visit went, despite him asking. Is Gretchen going to fall head over heels for Innie Dylan? If so, how does that work? Is this one big therapy session where Dylan entered it because, yeah, he couldn't hold down a job, but also because him and his wife were undergoing therapy? Could this be some sort of therapy where everybody who is down on the severed floor is dealing with some sort of trauma in the outside world, such as Mark losing his wife Gemma? And if Dylan and Gretchen were having marital problems, perhaps that's why he got severed, in order to save their marriage. If it is all a big therapy situation and we are getting a lot of mentions of reintegration in this episode, specifically with Mark S., who is getting his brainwaves redone to incorporate his Innie and Outie into one, similar to how we saw Petey back in season 1, is the next step for Dylan then reintegration, melding together Innie and Outie Dylan to save their marriage? It looks like they are still together. I was thinking perhaps Dylan was actually watching the kids at Gretchen's house. It is not 100% clear if it is Gretchen's or they share the house, but the way that they interact, and she does kiss him and say, "I love you," I've got to think they are still together. If it is the therapy situation and Dylan is able to be reintegrated, will that save their marriage? Or will it be this thing where Gretchen is carrying on with another version of her husband on the inside and still suffering and having a terrible marriage on the outside world? There's a lot to dive into with this theory. And circling back once again, with her dressed in some sort of perhaps security law enforcement outfit, is she a Lumen employee? Did she set this up, or did they suggest that her husband get severed and suggest, hey, he might be really successful on the severed floor? And in fact, he is, and they were right. Did Gretchen hook him up and recruit him into Lumen? If you remember my video from last week, I talked about the fact that Kobelvig could potentially have recruited Mark into Lumen. Is there some sort of recruitment thing where once someone gets recruited, they're working on something? And my next question is, if that's the case, we know Gemma is the subject of Cold Harbor that Mark is working on, then what is Dylan working on? Is there a relative? At first I would have thought, okay, well, who knows? Maybe Dylan's wife is down on the testing floor and he's working on her, but she's not, because we do see them interacting in the real world, which, by the way, is such a weird, weird world. Maybe I'll do a theory video on that at some point this season. I'd also like to shout out Merritt Weaver doing a great job playing the role of Gretchen. I am really excited how this shakes out between the two of them. Will other Innies get to have a visitation with somebody from the outside? I'm not sure who they would actually visit with, though. I doubt they're going to be bringing in Devin to be visiting with Mark S. I could see them perhaps bringing in his brother-in-law Rickon, given that there does seem to now be some connection between him and Lumen. He could potentially be working for them. Helly? That would be interesting. Who would they bring in as a visitation for Helly? And really, why would they? Because it does seem like it is Helena down there. That awkward moment of an almost kiss was the polar opposite of their kiss back in season 1. And the way that Helly held Irving's hand, it didn't strike me as something where she was trying to give him comfort, but instead give herself a sense of humanity by touching another human. Helena on the outside is cold. She is robotic. I think she is desperate for human connection, and perhaps she didn't know how to make that move with Mark. And if we're talking about other Innies and visitation situations, who would come and visit Irving? I don't think Bert's coming back, and you know what? Even if he wanted to, doubtful that Lumen would ever allow that to happen. It was interesting in this episode. Irving learned a little bit more when he went to O&D. What is up with that exports floor? That's something that maybe I'll dive into and could potentially be tied in with the goats somehow. Again, really trying to put some pieces together and connect some dots on the goat situation so I can actually put a well-formed theory video together on that. I am curious, do you have any theories or thoughts on the goat people? Are they people that are living there permanently in Lumen? They do seem to be all severed because, of course, Miss Casey was working with them as a wellness counselor. We got confirmation of that. Those people just seem so strange and so different than our friends in MDR. I am really interested to know how the goat of it all ends up shaking out this season, what it means. Are they just test subjects for the technology that Lumen is working on? I assume so, but there's also got to be more to it. They're not just going to have a dude dressed in a goat suit for no reason. Coming back to my main theory of the video, though, I do think there is some connection between Gretchen and Lumen. I think that her having these visits with Innie Dillon is maybe going to create even more strife in their marriage, which leads me to wonder, will it be reintegration, or in a strange twist, could they end up divorcing or separating in the outside world, and then Gretchen ends up just carrying on with Innie Dillon as a secret affair? Imagine having a secret affair with your own husband. This show is just wild. I love every single second of it. I have not been engaged with the show like this in quite some time. It is so great to have it back on our screens. And not only that, but immersed in our social media lives. I'm on LinkedIn often, and I have just loved seeing Lumen's LinkedIn presence. The way that they post and make them seem like a real company when in fact they are a fictional company, but are creating this connection for viewers. Exceptional storytelling on and off the screen. Apple TV Plus marketing team, I mentioned it before, but if you need a consultant, I am in Southern California, and this would be my dream to work on marketing for a TV show like this. You guys are the best. I would love to know your thoughts on Gretchen, on the family visitation suite, and what you think is going to go on between Dylan and his wife moving forward. Do we think there is a Gretchen-Lumen connection? I sure think so. And I am excited to have my theory proven true. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button and go ahead and like this video. Stick with me for the rest of Severance Season 2. I'll be here weekly with theory videos. I stopped doing the reviews because, let's face it, my review is a rave for every single episode. It's more diving into these nitty-gritty theories to really investigate, put our detective hats on, and figure out what's going on. And who knows? Maybe I'll be right about some things, maybe I'll be wrong. Either way, I am here for that elevator ride every single week. And I cover a lot of other dark TV shows, finishing up Dexter Original Sin on Paramount Plus with Showtime, The Hunting Party on NBC, School Spirits on Paramount Plus, The White Lotus, which is going to be coming up in February, and a new one by Dan Fogelman with Sterling K. Brown called Paradise on Hulu. I've got a review up there with the first 3 episodes. It's got a really big twist. Highly recommend. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Cannot wait to be back for Severance again next week. Until then, Media Melanie, clicking off.